I gave my seat to an old woman on the bus. She grabbed my wrist and said, "If your husband gives you a necklace, put it in water first." That night, I found out his gift wasn't love. It was a death sentence. At 6:03 in the morning, the water in the glass on my kitchen counter was the color of a bruise. Not cloudy, not slightly off. I mean green, thick, shimmering, with a slick film on the surface that caught the cabinet light the way gasoline catches the sun. The teardrop pendant my husband had given me the night before was sitting at the bottom of the glass in 2 clean pieces, split along a seam so fine I never would have found it on my own. And resting there at the bottom, beneath the ruined pendant, was a folded strip of plastic and a gray powder that looked, in the early morning light of my kitchen on Culebra Road in San Antonio, Texas, like something between ash and death. My hands were shaking before my brain caught up to why. I fished the plastic strip out with a spoon, rinsed it under the tap, unfolded it on a dish towel with fingers that wouldn't stay still. It was a miniaturized copy of my life insurance policy. My name, my signature, a beneficiary amendment dated 9 days prior. The payout amount made my chest cave in the way a building does when the supports are removed. Slowly, then all at once. And in the lower right corner, in my husband Mauricio's handwriting, the same handwriting I had watched sign leases and birthday cards for 8 years, were 4 words that rearranged my entire understanding of my life. Tomorrow night, make it look natural. I heard footsteps in the hallway. You need to understand who I was before that morning, so you can understand exactly how long I had been choosing not to see. My name is Daniela Vega, Daniela Reyes before the marriage, and for the previous 8 years, I had been the kind of woman who absorbed inconvenience the way good upholstery absorbs spills, quietly, completely, and with almost no visible evidence that anything had gone wrong. I worked as a payroll specialist at a mid-sized construction firm on the northwest side of San Antonio. I balanced other people's money with a precision that never once translated into financial stability in my own life, because my husband and I had that particular arrangement where one person handles the spreadsheets and the other person handles spending, with the breezy confidence of someone who has never had to do the math. Mauricio Vega was 36, a site supervisor for a commercial paving company, a man built wide and solid, with a laugh that could fill a room when he wanted it to. He did not always want it to. In the first years, he had. By year 5, the laugh was something he rationed, a resource managed carefully for public appearances. At home, with only me as the audience, conservation was practiced. 8 years together, no children, shared rent, shared bills, shared routines, so fused into daily life that they had stopped feeling like choices and started feeling like weather, something you move through, not something you made. The distance between us hadn't arrived like a disaster. It came in increments, the way water damage comes. Invisible at first, then suddenly everywhere. Late nights with explanations that didn't quite stack. A phone that was never on the table anymore. Always face down, always in a pocket, always in his hand when he walked into another room. Showers the second he got home. A sudden specific interest in cologne for a man who had used the same cheap deodorant for as long as I'd known him. None of it was proof. And I had spent my life being told, by small moments, accumulated silence, the particular exhaustion of women who live with men who are charming in public, that without proof, I was just being dramatic. So I called it stress. I called it a rough patch. I called it adult life, which sounded better than admitting I was translating every red flag into something more comfortable, because the alternative required courage I wasn't sure I had. That was before the bus. Before the old woman with the paper dry fingers and the impossible sentence that lodged in my chest like a stone. It was a Tuesday in October, 5:40 in the evening, the Route 90 heading west. I was standing because I was always standing, overworked, underthanked, holding the overhead rail and staring at my own reflection in the darkened window like she owed me an apology. An elderly woman boarded at the medical center stop, late 70s, maybe older, small in the way of people who have been compressed by decades rather than broken by them. She had a cane, 2 plastic bags of groceries, and the absolute certainty of someone who did not expect the world to make room for her, but was going to navigate it anyway. I gave her my seat before I'd consciously decided to. It's the kind of thing you do when you've been trained to make yourself smaller and call it manners. She gripped my wrist before she sat down. Her fingers were cold and dry as folded paper. She looked up at me, right at me, not at the general space I occupied, but specifically at me, with dark eyes that had seen things they had never been invited to see, and she said it quietly, in the particular register of someone passing critical information in a crowded place. If your husband gives you a necklace, put it in water before you wear it. I almost smiled, because the sentence was too strange to belong to the real world, because I was on a city bus in San Antonio at 5:40 on a Tuesday, not in a movie, not in a fairy tale, not in any narrative framework where a stranger grabs your wrist and warns you about jewelry, but her eyes. Her eyes did not belong to the same category as the sentence. Her eyes were the eyes of a woman who had seen something specific and was doing the only thing she could think to do with the knowledge. She got off 3 stops later. I watched her through the window as the bus pulled away. She did not look back. By the time I climbed the stairs to our apartment, I had filed the whole encounter under weird city folklore and largely moved on. I had real things to think about. Rent was due in 10 days. My boss had been circling layoffs for 2 months. My husband had been coming home late in a cloud of new cologne. I had bigger problems. That was, of course, exactly what I was supposed to think. Mauricio came home at 11:15 that night wearing a smile I had never seen seen before. Not his distracted half smirk, not the flat, performative warmth he deployed at family dinners. Something different, brighter, stranger, with the texture of something practiced in the car on the drive home. He set a small blue box on the kitchen counter and said, with a lightness that didn't reach his eyes, "Don't look at me like that. It's for you." The room went very still. Mauricio was not a gift man. He forgot anniversaries unless there was a witness. He once brought home gas station carnations after a 3-day argument and accepted the gratitude with the energy of a man who expected a standing ovation. He was not spontaneous jewelry man. He was definitely not this man, the one standing in my kitchen at 11:15 p.m., watching me open a blue box with an expression of careful patience. Inside was a delicate gold necklace, teardrop pendant, delicate chain, the kind of piece a woman spends real money on. "It's beautiful," I said, and my voice sounded borrowed from someone calmer. "Put it on," he said. "Now?" "Yeah, too fast. I want to see it on you." And that was the moment Teresa's words returned, not gradually but all at once like a bucket of cold water. And I understood with animal clarity that the strangeness in his voice was not impatience. It was urgency wearing patience's clothing, the way a person trying not to spook a horse at the edge of a cliff sounds controlled and gentle while meaning the opposite of both. I laughed. I needed 3 seconds to think, and said I wanted to wash my hands first. Mauricio's face shifted by a fraction, not anger, not disappointment, something worse, the micro-expression of a man whose timeline has just been interrupted. When he went to the bedroom to change, I stood at the kitchen sink, heart slamming against my ribs, telling myself I was being ridiculous. Then I filled a glass with water. I lowered the necklace in. I left it on the far end of the counter under the cabinet light and went to bed feeling embarrassed of myself and unable to stop. Mauricio lay awake beside me longer than usual. I could feel him thinking in the dark. After midnight, I heard him get up and pad toward the kitchen. "Stop, come back." I did not sleep. At 6:03 a.m., the smell woke me. Sour, metallic, wrong in the way that certain smells are wrong before your brain has fully classified them. Wrong the way your body knows before language arrives. I walked to the kitchen barefoot, still in my old sleep shirt, and stopped so hard my heel slid on the tile, the glass, the green water, the split pendant, the gray powder, the folded strip of plastic. I stood there for what might have been 30 seconds or 3 minutes, my body processing information faster than I could form words for it. Then my hands moved. Spoon, rinse, unfold, dish towel, my life insurance policy, miniaturized and forged, with a beneficiary amendment 9 days old and a payout figure large enough to solve several of Mauricio's problems in one transaction, and 4 words, in his handwriting, in the lower corner: "Tomorrow night. Make it look natural." I heard him in the hallway. The decision that followed happened in the part of the brain located below language and above panic, the part that's been making survival calls since long before humans had words for what they were doing. I shoved the policy copy into my robe pocket. I dumped the ruined necklace back into the green water. I turned around just as Mauricio walked in, scratching the back of his neck like this was a Thursday. His eyes went straight to the glass. "You're up early," he said. Couldn't sleep. He saw the water. Something hot and ugly moved through his face, fast and controlled, like a man swallowing a reaction he'd been trained to manage. "What happened?" I shrugged. "Cheap metal, I guess. Sorry." 2 seconds of silence. Dense, pressurized. Then a small, careful laugh that landed dead on the tile between us. "That's weird. I'll take it back." I watched him reach for the glass with hands that were not quite steady and understood, with a clarity that felt like ice in my sternum. This was not a man disappointed that his gift was ruined. This was a man calculating how much I knew. I moved through that workday like a machine that nobody realized was on fire inside. The accounting office, the payroll summaries, the 2 emails, the fake headache. The lunch break spent in a bathroom stall with a miniature insurance policy in my hands, and a question I couldn't stop asking. Who helps a man forge his wife's signature on a beneficiary amendment? Someone who knows insurance language. Someone who has done something adjacent to this before. At 12:41 p.m., I walked 3 blocks to a taqueria on the northwest side that had a payphone I'd walked past 100 times without ever thinking I'd need it. I did not use my cell phone. I gave the insurance company my policy number and asked, in the voice of a woman doing routine tax season paperwork review, to confirm my current beneficiary. The representative told me the beneficiary had been changed 9 days ago from my sister Elena to my husband, Mauricio Vega. I leaned one hand against the wall, the sidewalk tilted. I never authorized that. A pause. Her voice lowered. "Ma'am, there is a signed request on file." Of course there was. He had been watching me sign things for 8 years. Lease renewals, birthday cards, gift tags I'd signed for both of us because he couldn't be bothered. Familiarity is the oldest burglary tool in a marriage. I hung up the payphone and stood on that sidewalk in the October sun while San Antonio moved around me. Traffic, a woman pushing a stroller, the specific smell of a taco truck doing lunch service, and felt my fear transform. Not disappear, transform. Fear plus information becomes something colder and more directional, a tool instead of a fog. I thought about going to the police first, but fear doesn't produce textbook decisions. It produces arithmetic. Mauricio's cousin was a deputy in Bezar County. Mauricio himself had no record, no public temper, nothing that would make a stranger at a police desk believe that the pleasant-faced site supervisor, standing across from his wife, planned to kill her in a way that looked natural. Before I went anywhere official, I needed more. I called Elena. My sister picked up on the second ring with the brusque efficiency of a woman running double shifts at a rehabilitation clinic on 4 hours of sleep. The second she heard my voice, she changed registers completely. I told her only the facts, the necklace, the green water, the powder, the policy, the 4 words in his handwriting. She was silent for exactly 3 seconds. Pack a bag and get out right now. If I disappear, he'll know something went wrong. Daniela, her voice went flat and very serious. Men like this do not stop because you try to be reasonable. But there was something else. A splinter under the skin I couldn't stop feeling. The old woman on the bus did not guess. She knew, which meant someone close to the danger had recognized it. Before I went anywhere, I needed to understand whether Mauricio was acting alone and what tomorrow night specifically meant. The next morning, Elena arrived outside my office in her 2011 Honda Civic with a man I hadn't seen in 2 years sitting in the passenger seat. Gabriel Soto, my cousin by marriage, a former fraud investigator for a regional insurance firm before a back injury ended that chapter. Gabriel had the particular calm of someone who knows exactly where the paperwork is buried because he used to bury it himself, professionally, on behalf of people who'd been cheated by those who thought insurance language was a private language. We stood in the parking lot behind a tire shop on a side street and I explained everything. Gabriel did not interrupt. When I finished, he asked to see the screenshots I'd taken of the policy copy, zoomed in on the beneficiary amendment language, and said, quietly, with the specific tone of a man recognizing a pattern, "This isn't opportunistic read. Somebody coached him. The phrasing matches claim staging. There's a template to this." He looked up at me. Whoever helped him has done something adjacent to this before. That afternoon, October 14th, a Thursday, at 2:30 p.m., I walked into the Bexar County Non-Emergency Police Office with my sister, my cousin, a sandwich bag containing the miniature policy copy, and a glass wrapped in a dish towel inside a grocery bag. The detective who took my statement was named Laura Phelps, 15 years with the San Antonio PD, the last 4 in financial crimes and domestic threat assessment. She had a face built for neutrality, the kind of professional expressionlessness that you initially read as indifference and later recognize as the discipline of someone who has learned not to telegraph what she's thinking until she's certain. She listened to everything without interrupting. Then she asked one very specific question. "Has he tried to get you alone overnight anywhere recently?" "Not yet," I said. "Why?" "Because they usually rehearse the location before the event," she said. "Or they've already chosen it." When I mentioned the text I'd seen on Mauricio's phone, "Cabin cleaner, she'll go if I make it romantic," Phelps sat visibly straighter. She asked whether Mauricio had access to a specific property. I remembered suddenly 2 mentions of a cabin near Medina Lake, a guy's fishing trip, mentioned twice in the last month in the easy, casual way of someone field testing a story. Phelps made a call while I was still talking. They couldn't arrest him yet. The evidence pointed without closing. But what Phelps said next is the sentence I still hear in a particular register of clarity. Late at night, when I'm trying to remember how I survived. "If he invites you somewhere tomorrow night and you agree to go, we may be able to build attempted murder instead of just suspicious fraud. We'd be with you the whole way." She looked at Elena, who had already opened her mouth. "I want her alive. If we move too early without enough, he walks, disappears, or tries again smarter." They wired me at 4:00 p.m. the following day. Detective Phelps, alongside Officer Marcus Ruiz, 8 years patrol, and Officer Yesenia Delgado, 4 years, both positioned in vehicles on roads surrounding the property. Gabriel set up location sharing between my phone and 3 separate contacts. A small digital recorder went into my purse. A second went under the lining of my jacket. I memorized my emergency phrase until it became less a sentence and more a reflex. I forgot my allergy pills in the car. Mauricio came home that evening with takeout and a plan, wearing the face of a peace offering. Halfway through dinner, he reached across the table and squeezed my hand with the warmth of a man who had been practicing warmth all day. "I've been thinking," he said. "We've had a rough year. We have. So let me fix it. Tomorrow night. Just us. Drive out to a little cabin my buddy lets me use. Lakeview, stars, no phones. We cook, talk, start over." I let my shoulders relax by degrees. "Tomorrow?" "Yeah," he smiled. "I already took care of everything." That sentence. I already took care of everything. It hung in the air between us while he cleared plates and I sat very still, feeling my pulse in my wrists, understanding that the version of me who had spent years translating danger into inconvenience was gone, and what remained was someone who had learned, in 72 hours, to read the room with her entire body. I said yes. He drove west the next evening just after sunset, one hand on the wheel at 12 o'clock, humming along to a country song with the studied ease of a man auditioning for normal husband. Every 10 minutes he glanced at me, not with tenderness, but with the look of someone confirming that the story is still on track. The cabin was a weather-beaten one-story off a private gravel road, bordered by mesquite and live oak. No neighboring lights for half a mile. The indigo sky enormous overhead. Inside, it smelled like cedar, dust, and bleach. Too much bleach. The kind of cleaning that isn't about cleanliness. My eyes caught on details his candlelight and wine couldn't cover. A folded tarp behind a chair. A fresh scratch on the floorboards near the back door. A new lock on the inside of the bedroom. He poured wine. I raised the glass to my lips without drinking. He proposed a toast. "To new beginnings," he said. "To honesty," I said. His smile didn't move, but something behind it did. I drifted toward the kitchen nook, pretending to look around, and saw the drawer slightly open beneath the sink. Inside, a vial with no label. A roll of medical tape. Not improvisation. Preparation. We ate. He performed reconciliation with the strained sheer of a man reading dialogue off the back of his teeth, and then I asked, in a voice that surprised me with its steadiness, "When did you change my insurance beneficiary?" The room froze. He recovered quickly, too quickly, let out a low laugh. "So that's what this is. You went through my stuff. You forged my signature. I handled paperwork," he said. "You always forget things." Then the mask came off. Not all at once, in stages, like a building losing windows. He leaned back in his chair and looked at me with an expression I had never seen directed at me before, contempt without the effort of concealment. "Do you know what it's like?" he said. "Living with somebody who notices everything except the one thing that matters? You were supposed to make life easier. That was the whole point." I felt something ice over in my chest. The whole point of what? He looked at me like the answer was obvious. "Of you. There are sentences that don't land all at once. They bloom later, poisonous and slow. But that one landed immediately, and what it did to 8 years of memory was violent and final. I had not been chosen. I had been selected. Steady paycheck, good credit, careful habits, predictable routines, no children to complicate the exit. I was inventory. I was a policy with legs. I stood up. "Who is R?" His face changed. The performance was gone entirely now, and what remained was a man exhausted by having to maintain one. "Rosa," he said. She understood what I deserved. Rosa. Not a man from a job site, a woman. The late nights and hallway calls and new cologne rearranged themselves into a picture I hadn't had the full pieces for until that exact moment. They weren't improvising passion. They were planning a transaction. My death, priced and scheduled, with a draft note already prepared on her phone for the aftermath. She'd been depressed lately. Heartbreaking, but not shocking. A sentence designed to steal not just my life, but my voice, retroactively from beyond it. He stood up too. "I'm leaving," I said. "No," he said. "You're not." He moved fast. Not drunk, not sloppy. With the terrifying practicality of someone who has run the scenario in his head enough times to know the steps. He caught my forearm and slammed me into the table edge. Plates hit the floor. Pain detonated up my side. I twisted, drove my knee forward, got one arm free, and shouted toward my purse on the counter, loud enough for the recorder and God and anyone within range of the road outside. "I forgot my allergy pills in the car." Mauricio froze for half a second, just long enough to realize what the sentence was. Then the front door came inward, so hard it hit the wall. Detective Phelps first, 2 officers behind her, voices overlapping, sharp and precise, hands where I can see them. Mauricio turned toward the back of the cabin, for the vial, for the door, for some exit from the version of events where he was caught, and made it 3 steps before Officer Ruiz took him to the floor. I collapsed against the counter. My teeth were clicking. Phelps reached me with the efficient steadiness of someone who catches people at the edge of catastrophes for a living. "You're okay," she said. It wasn't true yet, but I held on to it anyway. The search took 4 hours and dismantled every story Mauricio's public defender would later attempt to construct. In the bedroom closet, rope, duct tape, an additional tarp, and a cooler containing chemicals that told a story impossible to characterize as a romantic getaway. In the kitchen drawer, the unlabeled vial, which lab testing would later confirm, contained a veterinary-grade sedative at a concentration designed to incapacitate a person of my approximate body weight within 15 to 20 minutes of skin absorption. In Mauricio's truck, a second phone. Messages between him and Rosa, including one sent an hour before we arrived at the cabin. "After tonight, we're clear. And below that, make sure there's bruising from the stairs, not the hands. A staged fall. Insurance payout. Clean narrative." The bruising detail was the thing that kept returning to me in the weeks that followed. The specificity of it. The craft. They had thought about what my body would look like afterward and planned the story around it. That is the sentence that made me understand, finally and completely, that they had never thought of me as a person. I was a problem being solved. Rosa was arrested before sunrise at a motel near Careville. In person, she was ordinary-faced, hard-eyed, 6 years older than I'd imagined during the long, self-punishing nights when I'd tried to construct a reason for the late calls. Gabriel Soto, working a laptop in the parking lot of the police station, found her prior record within an hour. Prescription fraud and identity theft in Comal County, under a previous surname, charges that had followed her quietly for years without ever making it into a conversation that might have warned me. He did it with the grim satisfaction of a man who has seen too many greedy people underestimate documentation. The case escalated in the following days as detectives subpoenaed phone records, bank transfers, and cloud backups Mauricio had forgotten to delete. His employer confirmed he had lied about the cabin's ownership. The property belonged to Rosa's uncle, who claimed he'd believed it was being used for a private anniversary weekend. Forensic testing of the back steps found evidence of a prior cleanup, and then Gabriel found the kill shot, an auto-synced voice memo recorded accidentally when Mauricio thought he was testing the cabin's speaker system. The file began with static, then his voice cursing under his breath, then Rosa's voice, clear and specific and completely devastating. "Once she's dizzy, push from the side steps. Head injury. Water if needed. Widower's cry, baby, just don't overdo it." The prosecutor played that recording in court. The temperature in the room changed. 3 weeks after Mauricio's arrest, Detective Phelps called me with 2 words. "We found her. Teresa Maldonado, 72 years old, formerly a house cleaner in Alamo Heights. One of those houses had been Rosa's rental property." I met Teresa in a small interview room at the station on a Wednesday afternoon in November. In daylight, she looked frailer and simultaneously tougher, the way certain people compact rather than diminish with age. She folded her hands over her cane brain and studied me with the economy of someone who has stopped wasting sympathy on people who haven't earned it. "I'm sorry I scared you," she said. "How did you know?" I asked. She looked down. "Because I heard them." Weeks before our encounter on the Route 90, while cleaning Rosa's rental house, Teresa had caught part of a speakerphone argument between Rosa and Maurizio. She remembered specific words: policy, necklace, dose, cabin, tomorrow night. She had tried to convince herself they were sick people joking. Then she'd seen a printed copy of my insurance information half sticking out of Rosa's purse and understood what she was looking at. She had tried to memorize my face from a photo on Rosa's phone. When she spotted me on the bus by the collision of luck and whatever force it is that sometimes puts a warning in the path of a woman who needs one, she used the only chance she had. "Why not the police?" I asked, her mouth twisted. "Because poor old women who clean houses hear ugly things. People with money always think no one will believe us." The answer was both sad and structurally true. She did what she calculated was the most she could safely do. Not enough to expose herself fully, just enough to send a message to a stranger she'd recognized from a photo in a woman's purse. A sentence on a city bus. That was the margin. That was how close it came. Mauricio's public defender tried every available angle. Marital stress, misunderstood texts, a consensual argument during a romantic trip. The necklace was only jewelry. The insurance change was routine planning. The chemicals were for pest control. The rope was for outdoor repairs. Each explanation was more insulting than the last, and each one landed flatter because of what preceded it in the record. I testified on the third day of trial. People warned me cross-examination would be brutal. They were right, though not in the way I'd anticipated. It wasn't the questions that were the hardest part. It was having to use plain, factual language for things my mind still sometimes classified as nightmare. Yes, that was my life insurance policy. Yes, he served wine. Yes, he grabbed me when I tried to leave. Mauricio looked at me for the first time halfway through cross-examination when his attorney suggested I had fabricated the story to justify abandoning the marriage. I turned and met his eyes directly. There was no remorse there, only resentment that I had not died on schedule. In that moment, the last thing I was still carrying that resembled the marriage let go. Not love that had died earlier, incrementally, in all the ways that love dies when it's treated as a utility. Something else. The compulsion to make sense of him, to find the version of this story where the man I spent 8 years with was redeemable, if only I looked from the right angle. There was no right angle. The jury convicted both Mauricio and Rosa on all counts: attempted murder, conspiracy, insurance fraud, forgery. Mauricio received 32 years. Rosa received 38, owing to her prior fraud history and her documented role in procurement and planning. The necklace, the sedative, the cabin, the note on her phone about a woman who'd been depressed lately. When the judge read the numbers, I did not feel triumphant. I felt like a storm had passed and I could finally see the roof. Justice does not arrive like a trumpet. It arrives like paperwork, doors closing, a bailiff moving 2 handcuffed people away from a courtroom while fluorescent lights hum overhead and someone in the back row coughs. What changes your life is not the moment of verdict, but the quieter moment after, when the legal machinery has finished and you still have to decide how to live inside your own skin. Epilogue. The glass on the counter. 6 months after the trial, I got on a bus. On purpose. The Route 90 heading west, 5:40 in the evening. I sat by the window with my hands in my lap and watched San Antonio move past in its warm, complicated specificity. Tire shops and taco trucks and laundromats and payday loan signs and a man selling cold watermelon from a pickup truck bed. The same city, not the same woman moving through it. At the third stop, an elderly woman boarded with grocery bags and a cane. I stood before I'd fully decided to. She thanked me and sat with the careful dignity of people accustomed to a world that doesn't slow down. For one specific second, my throat closed so tight I thought I might cry in public, in front of strangers, on a city bus. Not because she was Teresa, she wasn't, but because the kindness was still in my body, unrequested, automatic, stubbornly intact. And the fact that it had survived everything felt like the most honest proof I had that I was still myself. Teresa and I stayed in touch. Not dramatically, not as a movie version mutual salvation, groceries, coffee, rides to appointments, paperwork assistance. She told stories that bent in unexpected directions and refused to let me romanticize the thing that had happened. "I didn't save you alone," she said once, over coffee in her kitchen. "You believed yourself in time. That matters too." She was right, and I resisted the sentence initially because it sounded smaller than what had happened. Believing yourself felt insufficient next to the green water and the photographs and the voice recorder and 32 years handed down by a judge in a Bexar County courtroom. But the hinge was there. The old warning, the ruined water, the moment in my kitchen when I chose not to rationalize the smell, the color, the note in Mauricio's handwriting, the moment I decided to treat my fear as information instead of embarrassment. The margin between my life and its absence was that decision. I was promoted to payroll manager the following year. I signed a lease alone on a small duplex near Woodlawn Lake with yellow kitchen curtains and a front door with a tendency to stick. The first time I wrote my signature on that lease with only myself as the witness, my hand barely shook. Independence doesn't arrive as a revelation. It arrives as a utility deposit and a shelf you assemble yourself and the particular quiet of a space that's yours because you said so. I volunteer twice a month with a local women's legal aid organization, mostly helping organize records and explain insurance language, and sitting with women whose whose hands shake while they try to decide whether their fear is serious enough. Whenever one of them says, "Maybe I'm overreacting," I feel something protective and precise rise in me. "No," I tell them. "Start with the facts. But no, you are not crazy for paying attention." Some nights I still dream about the cabin. In the dream, the door never opens, because no one comes, because I didn't believe the warning in time, because I stood in my kitchen at 6:03 a.m. and looked at the green water and told myself I was being dramatic. I wake with my heart slamming against my ribs and stand in my own kitchen until the room settles around me. On those nights, I fill a glass with water and leave it on the counter under the cabinet light, not out of fear, as ritual, as remembrance, as the most personal proof I have that what looks harmless can always be tested. The old version of me, the one who absorbed inconvenience and called it grace, who translated red flags into inconvenient weather, who handed her wrist to a stranger on a bus and almost smiled because the warning sounded too strange to be real. That woman was not weak. She was exhausted. She had been trained by small moments and accumulated silence and the particular weight of a world that asks women to be skeptical of their own instincts, to confuse self-doubt with wisdom. What I know now, what Teresa knew, what Gabriel knew, what Detective Phelps knew in the way of someone who has seen this story from the wrong ending too many times, is that survival doesn't always arrive like lightning. Sometimes it arrives like a woman who is tired and overworked and still polite, standing up on a city bus to give her seat away. Sometimes it arrives in the grip of a paper-dry hand, and a sentence that sounds impossible until the night it becomes the only thing standing between you and a lake you were never supposed to come home from. Sometimes it looks like a glass of water, left on a counter under a cabinet light, holding something that was meant to be a gift. And sometimes, most importantly, most quietly, most finally,
My brother forced a DNA test to cut me out of my dad's will, but when the lawyer opened the envelope, he didn't look at me. He looked at him. I spent 18 years being told I didn't belong. My stepmother, Diane, would stare at me across the dinner table, sterling silver forks on bone china, everything perfect, everything calculated, and say just loud enough for Dad to hear, "It's strange, William. He looks nothing like you." My brother Preston would laugh, that sharp bark that made my shoulders tense. "Maybe he's not even really your son. Maybe Mom had a thing with the mailman." My real mother died when I was 3, cancer. I don't remember her face, just the smell of her perfume, something floral and soft that disappeared the day Diane moved into our house. For 18 years, I believed them. So when Dad died last month and Preston stood up at the will, reading, demanding I take a DNA test to prove I deserved any part of the estate, I wasn't surprised. What surprised me was what happened when the lawyer opened the envelope. He didn't look at me. He looked at Preston. "My name is Ethan Carmichael. I'm 34 years old, senior financial analyst at Morrison & Clark in Boston. I live in a one-bedroom apartment in Beacon Hill, drive a 7-year-old Subaru, and haven't spoken to anyone in my father's house since I was 17. That's when I left. Senior year of high school, packed a duffel bag at 2 a.m. I walked out the front door of the Carmichael estate and never looked back. I found out Dad died through an email, not a phone call, not even a text. An email from his attorney, Lawrence Rothstein, saying William Carmichael had passed away from a stroke on November 8th, and my presence was required at the reading of his will. The email was formal, cold, like I was a business associate, not his son. I stared at it for 3 hours before I replied. The Carmichael estate sat on 12 acres in Wellesley, Massachusetts. Georgian brick, white columns, circular driveway with a fountain in the center. The kind of house that appeared in magazines under headlines like New England Elegance. I pulled up in my Subaru, rust spots on the bumper, a crack in the windshield, and felt like I was driving a bicycle to a Bentley convention. Diane stood at the front window, not grief on her face, anxiety like she was bracing for impact. The house was full of relatives I barely recognized. Second cousins, business partners, people who whispered when I walked past, only here for the money. 17 years, not one visit, some son. Preston stood at the center of the room, wearing a charcoal Tom Ford suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Hair perfectly styled, Rolex on his wrist, the golden child in every way that mattered to this family. He saw me and smiled, not friendly, victorious. "Ethan," he said loud enough for everyone to hear, "glad you could make it." I nodded, didn't shake his hand. Lawrence Rothstein appeared in the doorway, mid-60s wire-rimmed glasses, 37 years practicing estate law. According to the plaque in his office, "Everyone please the library." We filed in the library where Dad used to read to me when I was young. Before Diane, before Preston, before everything turned cold, I took a seat in the back. Preston and Diane sat front row center like they were attending a Broadway show. Lawrence cleared his throat. "Before we begin, there's a matter that must be addressed." Preston stood. "Actually, Lawrence, I have something to say first." He turned to face the room, 32 people staring back. "My father's will states that his estate will be divided among his biological children," but he looked directly directly at me. There's been speculation for years about whether Ethan is actually Dad's son. Murmurs rippled through the room. I think in the interest of fairness and legal clarity, Ethan should take a DNA test to prove he's biologically related to William Carmichael. The room erupted, voices overlapping, some supportive, some outraged. That's ridiculous. Actually, that's reasonable. This is about money, not family. Diane stood beside Preston. I hate to say this, but I've always had doubts. William's first wife, she had a complicated past. It's only responsible to verify. My hands clenched the armrests of my chair. Every eye in the room was on me. Fine, I said quietly. The room went silent. I'll take the test, I stood. But the will says biological children. To be completely fair, shouldn't everyone claiming inheritance be tested? Preston laughed. Fine by me. I've got nothing to hide. But something flashed across Diane's face just for a second. Fear. The next week felt like drowning in slow motion. Lawrence arranged for DNA testing through Gene Tech Labs, a certified facility in Cambridge. Dr. Rachel Morrison, forensic DNA specialist, 23 years of experience, would oversee the process. We'll need samples from both of you, Dr. Morrison explained in her office. Clinical white walls, microscopes, refrigeration units, humming, cheek swabs, simple procedure. We'll compare your DNA to William Carmichael's medical records. Results take 5 to 7 days. Preston went first, confident, smiling like he was getting a teeth cleaning. I went second. My hand shook as Dr. Morrison swabbed the inside of my cheek. Nervous? She asked. Wouldn't you be? Results don't lie. Whatever the truth is, you'll have clarity. Clarity like that would fix 18 years of being told I didn't belong. I stayed at the Courtyard Marriott near Wellesley. Couldn't afford anything nicer. Couldn't stomach staying at the house. Preston texted me the next day. Dad's funeral is Thursday, 11 a.m., St. Paul's Church. Try to look respectable. I showed up in my only suit, navy blue from Macy's. Bought for job interviews 3 years ago. The church was packed. 400 people. Senators, CEOs, federal judges. An usher met me at the door. Name? Ethan Carmichael. He checked his clipboard. You're in section C, back row, behind distant cousins. I'd met twice behind Dad's business partners. Behind people who didn't even know him. The program listed family members in elegant calligraphy. Wife Diane Carmichael. Son Preston Carmichael. Other relatives Ethan Carmichael, not son, not family. Other Preston gave the first eulogy. Talked about Dad's business empire, his philanthropy, his devotion to family. My father taught me everything. How to negotiate, how to lead, how to be a man. He choked up. Real tears. Or maybe Preston was just that good at performing. Diane gave the second eulogy. She wore black Prada, pearls, a hat with a veil. William was my rock, my partner, the love of my life. Our son Preston was his greatest pride. She never said my name, not once. After the service, I stood alone by the exit while everyone else gathered in the reception hall. Shrimp cocktails, champagne, laughter that felt obscene. Then the housekeeper found me. Rosa Martinez, 63 years old. She'd worked for Dad since before I was born. Mr. Ethan, she whispered, pressing something into my hand. Third floor study, the locked one. He wanted you to see it. What is it? The key and the truth. I waited until 1 a.m. Everyone had left. The house was dark except for security lights. I used the key Rosa gave me. The third floor study had been locked for as long as I could remember. Dad's private office limits. The door opened with a click. I turned on the lights. The walls were covered with photographs of me. Professional surveillance photos. Me walking to work in Boston. Me at a coffee shop. Me at Morrison and Clark's office building. Me outside my apartment carrying groceries. Hundreds of them going back years. Dad had been watching my entire adult life. On the desk, a folder red labeled confidential. Inside, a DNA test dated 12 years ago. Preston Carmichael, 0% biological relationship to William Carmichael. My hands went numb. There were medical records from 2013. Preston had needed a kidney transplant. Genetic disorder. Dad had volunteered as a donor. The doctors told him he wasn't a match, not just incompatible. No genetic relationship at all. That's when he'd ordered the test. There were divorce papers filed 5 years ago. William Carmichael vs. Diane Shaw Carmichael, finalized September 2019. They'd been divorced for 5 years and there was a letter. Dad's handwriting shaky, written recently. Ethan, I failed you. When your mother died, I was broken. Diane appeared 6 months later. Beautiful, charming, exactly what a grieving widower hour needed to hear. I married her too quickly, believed her too easily. Preston was born a year later. I loved him, raised him as my son. But when he needed that transplant in 2013, the doctors told me the truth. No biological match, not even close. I ordered the DNA test. The results destroyed me. Diane had an affair. Preston wasn't mine, but I'd raised him for 14 years. He called me dad. How could I tell him his entire life was a lie? Then I had the stroke. 3 months after discovering the truth, the doctor said it was stress-induced. Diane took over everything. Power of attorney, medical decisions. She isolated me, controlled who visited, screened my calls. I tried to reach you, called your number dozens of times. Every call blocked, every message deleted. Diane made sure I divorced her legally 5 years ago, but she never left the house. Said it would traumatize Preston. I was too weak to fight, so I watched you from the shadows, hired investigators, got photos, lived through your success successes from a distance. You became everything I hoped you'd be: honest, hardworking, good. This will is my last chance to make things right, to give you what you deserve, to expose the truth. I'm sorry I couldn't be stronger. I'm sorry I let them push you out. I'm sorry for everything. I love you, son. I always..." The letter ended mid-sentence. He died before finishing it. I sat in that study for 3 hours reading the documents, staring at the photographs, trying to understand. Dad had known. For 12 years he'd known Preston wasn't his son, and he'd still let me walk out. Still let me believe I was the outsider. But the stroke, the power of attorney, Diane controlling everything. He'd been trapped. I heard footsteps on the stairs, heavy, deliberate. Preston appeared in the doorway. He looked at the photographs on the walls, at the folder in my hands. His face went white. "What is this?" he whispered. "The truth." He stepped inside, saw the DNA test on the desk, picked it up with shaking hands, read it. His legs buckled. He sat heavily in Dad's leather chair. "This is fake," he said. "It has to be fake. It's from 2013 when you needed the kidney transplant. Dad volunteered as a donor. They told him he wasn't a match." Preston's face crumbled. "He never said anything because he loved you anyway." "Because you called him Dad because telling you the truth would have destroyed you. Then why are you showing me this now? Because you demanded a DNA test. Because you stood in front of 32 people and called my legitimacy into question. Because you've spent your entire life making me feel like I didn't belong." I stood. "The DNA results come back Friday. When Lawrence reads them, everyone's going to know." Preston looked up at me, not with anger, with something worse, horror. The look of someone whose entire identity was shattering. "Does Mom know?" he whispered. "Read the divorce papers. She's the reason the test exists." The will reading was scheduled for Friday morning, December 1st, 10th a.m. Lawrence Rothstein's office in downtown Boston. Corner suite, 14th floor, windows overlooking the common, leather chairs, mahogany desk, law books lining the walls. Diane sat center stage wearing a black St. John suit, pearls, hair styled perfectly, but her hands were clenched tight in her lap. Preston sat beside her, but his chair was pulled 6 in away. He hadn't spoken to her since finding the study. I sat across from them. 3 other relatives filled the remaining seats. Second cousins who barely knew Dad but were named in the will for token amounts. Lawrence opened his briefcase. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. Before we proceed with the reading of William Carmichael's will, there's a matter to address." He pulled out a sealed envelope from Gene Tech Labs. The room went silent. Mr. Carmichael added a clause to his will 2 years before his death. The estate, valued at approximately $47 million, will be distributed solely to his biological children. All parties claiming inheritance were required to consent to DNA testing. Anyone who refused would forfeit their claim. Lawrence picked up a letter opener, sliced through the envelope. The results are as follows. My heart hammered against my ribs. Ethan Carmichael. Lawrence looked at me. Confirmed 99.999% biological match to William Carmichael. I exhaled slowly. Relief flooded through me. Diane let out a small breath too, still hoping. Lawrence continued. Preston Carmichael. He paused. The silence stretched. Zero biological relationship to William Carmichael detected. Preston shot to his feet. "That's impossible. There's been a mistake." He spun toward Diane. "Mom, tell them they're wrong. Tell them this is some kind of error." But Diane just sat there, frozen, color draining from her face. "This is a setup," she shouted. Lawrence tampered with the results. "This is fraud." I pulled out the 12-year-old DNA test from the folder, slid it across the desk. "Then explain this," I said quietly. Dad already knew. He found out in 2013 when Preston needed a kidney transplant and he volunteered as a donor. The doctors at Mass General told him there was no genetic match. That's when he ordered this test. I looked at Diane. 12 years. He knew for 12 years. He loved Preston anyway. Diane's voice cracked. He raised him. He called him his son. Mrs. Lawrence paused. "Or should I say Ms. Shaw, since your divorce from William Carmichael was finalized 5 years ago. You have no legal standing in this proceeding." Diane's face went from pale to gray. Preston stared at his mother. "You were divorced, Preston. Sweetie, it was just paperwork. It didn't mean you lied to me." His voice was barely a whisper. "About everything. I was protecting you." Diane reached for his hand. He jerked away. "Protecting me?" Preston's voice rose. "You spent my whole life telling me Ethan was probably illegitimate. You made me treat him like garbage. You convinced me I was the real son and he was the fake." He turned to me. His eyes were wet, and the whole time it was me. Lawrence cleared his throat. "There's more." Mr. Carmichael left a final letter. He wanted it read aloud in this setting. He pulled out a document, began reading Dad's words. The affair, the deception, the discovery during the transplant, the stroke, the power of attorney, Diane blocking access, the surveillance photos, the divorce, the will, as Dad's final act to expose the truth and protect me. When Lawrence finished, the room was silent. One of the cousins stood and left without a word. The other 2 followed. It was just us, me, Preston, Diane, and Lawrence. Preston sat with his head in his hands. "I don't know who I am anymore." "You're Preston Shaw," I said quietly. "That's who you've always been." But Dad cleared his throat, raised you, loved you, even after he knew that part was real. Then why did he leave me out of the will? Because Diane used you as a weapon. Because she poisoned you against me. Because he wanted the truth to come out and money was the only way to force it. Preston looked at Diane. "Who's my real father?" She didn't answer. "Who is he?" "Marcus Bennett?" she whispered. "A colleague at the firm. It was a mistake. mistake, a one-time thing. Does he know? Silence. Does he know I exist? I told him I miscarried. Preston made a sound. Not quite a laugh, not quite a sob. So I'm nobody's son. William's not my father. Marcus doesn't know I exist. And you? He looked at her with something close to hatred. You built my entire life on a lie. Lawrence folded his hands. The will is clear. The estate passes entirely to Ethan Carmichael. Preston Shaw receives nothing. Diane Shaw receives nothing. He looked at me. Mr. Carmichael, do you have any questions? Just one. What about the house? It's yours along with all properties, investments, and assets. Total value $47.3 million. Preston didn't fight it, didn't hire lawyers, didn't contest the will. He just left. Moved out of the estate 3 days later with 2 suitcases and his car. Diane tried to follow him. He told her if she ever contacted him again, he'd get a restraining order. I heard through Rosa that he moved to Portland, changed his name legally to Preston Shaw, started over. Diane moved to Florida, lives in a condo in Boca Raton. We've never spoken since that day in Lawrence's office. I'm sitting in Dad's study now, the 3rd floor room with the photographs still on the walls. I had them framed, a reminder that even when I thought I was alone, someone was watching, someone cared. The estate is being turned into a nonprofit, the Carmichael Foundation for Children Without Parents, scholarships, housing assistance, therapy programs. I kept the house, but I don't live here. Too many ghosts. I visit on weekends, sit in this study, read Dad's unfinished letter. I love you, son. I always what? Always knew, always believed, always hoped. I'll never know, but I know this. DNA doesn't make you family. Sacrifice does. Love does. Being there does. Preston spent 31 years being told he was William Carmichael's son, believing it, building his identity around it. I spent 18 years being told I wasn't. When the truth came out, we both lost something, but I gained something too. Proof that the man who raised me knew exactly who I was, believed in me even from a distance, left me everything not because of blood, but because of choice. Last week I got a letter handwritten, no return address. Inside one sentence, thank you for not destroying me worse than I destroyed myself. P. I folded it, put it in the desk drawer next to Dad's unfinished letter. Maybe someday I'll respond, but today I'm just sitting here looking at photographs of a man who loved me enough to fight for me in the only way he could, through the truth. Justice doesn't belong to blood. It belongs to the people who